Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Hope your day has been fulfilling and, as I said earlier, prosperous. Um, we're down at the midway point of the academy, so this is our sixth session, and I'm hoping that everybody's getting something out of it, worthy of your time and your energy, and that you're finding the the space to share this work that you're learning with others in your network. Um, so I just wanted to go down, just review the webinar rules. This webinar is being recorded. The microphones are muted unless you are speaking. If you're invited to speak, remember to unmute yourself and then mute again once you're finished. Use the chat function for relevant questions and comments. If you are speaking or asking a question, keep it brief and to the point to respect everyone's time. Allow the presenter to manage the time and follow the agenda, especially during Q&A sessions. Do not share or record any part of the webinar without permission from the host. Some content may be proprietary or confidential. I just want to share this with you. I know many of you outside of the Baltimore area, but if you happen to be in Baltimore or know people in Baltimore that could use some information around leadership, unlocking your potential, please share this with them. It's our first business workshop that we're hosting on October 25th from 12 noon to 2 p.m. The person who will be facilitating is Diana N. Brown, who's our business analyst at the Network for Developing Conscious Communities. We're preparing for our spring 26 Black Coopnomics Academy. So if you know some folks that didn't make it in this time or others who may be interested in sharing and learning, please feel free to share this information with them. They can visit our website at www.ndcc network and go to the pull down for Black Coopnomics Academy and get the enrollment right there. Social media connections are Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. Also, too, just a reminder that you have to fill out the feedback. I know some of you have and some of you haven't, but please do, because this feedback that you're giving us is really going to be helpful for us as we plan out the platform for future Coopnomics Academies. All right. So again, myself, Charmaine Davis, Michael Wood, Julian Hill, and Hans Petit Holmes, who we had last week. I do want to just introduce our speaker tonight, Tamar Israel, who's Director of Training and Development at Coopnomics. Tamar Israel serves as the Director of Training and Development at Coopnomics, where she engages directly with communities to bolster organizations and empowerment, along with offering financial management services. A passionate advocate for cultural awareness, social justice, and equitable access to nourishing foods, Tamar is deeply involved in the cooperative movement in New Orleans. She's in her role as the Education Outreach Coordinator at Cooperation New Orleans. She focuses on highlighting cooperation as both a cultural expression and a strategic pathway towards Black liberation. Particularly noteworthy is her role in facilitating the merger of 3 community groups into a worker self-directed nonprofit, paving the way for the establishment of community centers in New Orleans, Miami, and Orlando, Florida. Without further ado, I just want to introduce Tamar Israel to you. And hello, Tamar.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you so much for a beautiful introduction and also just having me in this space. This is, I think, my second or third piece with the Academy, so I'm excited to continue along this thread with you and also just to meet so many new people. I am going to share screen now because I do have a little PowerPoint and get us into our conversation tonight. This will be somewhat of a conversation, but also, I'll be presenting some information that you all might find very meaningful, no matter where you are in your journey to develop a co-op, or just be in leadership in your community and navigating towards liberation. Um, again, excited to be at the Academy. My workshop is Navigating Leadership, Strategies and Skills for Building an Effective Steering Committee. So tonight, what we'll be talking about, we'll start out with, of course, Ron has already done the welcome and introduced me. I'm sure you all are well acquainted with each other, but I would love to just learn more about who's in the room. So I'll give a prompt on what to do in the chat here in just a moment. But we'll talk about recruiting and organizing a cooperative steering committee. We'll go into the importance of a steering committee in cooperatives. And also do some Q&A and an open discussion. But there's quite a few points inside of this that we'll dive off into. So as Ron shared, he shared a little bit about who I am, quite a bit, but I'm a 20 plus years experience in accounting and business management. We talked a little bit about my work with Builders of the Highway Foundation, which is a worker self-directed nonprofit. So it's basically a nonprofit that has adopted a cooperative model. I'm also a member owner at the New Orleans Food Co-op, a member of Cooperation New Orleans, and a few other things. So as you can see, I'm deeply connected to the cooperative space. Would love to hear and know about who's in the room. Like I said, I believe you all have had time and opportunity to get acquainted with each other. So if you don't mind for me dropping in the chat your name, where you're calling in from, and maybe the co-op or organization that you're representing. That'll give me a little bit of insight on who's in the space and who I'm sharing space with tonight. And while you do that, let's just get right into it. So, recruiting and organizing a cooperative steering committee. We'll go into a few recruiting strategies or a conversation around that. Talk about diversity of perspectives, roles and responsibilities, and maybe even have some space for us to talk about some recruitment challenges. So, in recruitment, who should be on your co-op steering committee? In this, one of the things I feel like I want to lift out is each entity is going to be different, and what you need for your cooperative will require a different set of skills, a different set of capacities and abilities. But at the core, there's just some characteristics of what makes a person or people impactful for your steering committee. And oftentimes it really just depends on like what your cooperative is and the work that your cooperative is setting out to do. So some of the things like for us here locally, community was a really big important part of our organizing here in New Orleans. So having people that are respected and trusted within that community. whether it's an industry or community, having people who have knowledge and just understanding of the work that you're about to approach, whether it's community or industry, having that respect and trust is one of those core qualities. Good communication skills, of course, I think that goes um, deeply into saying that having people that are able to convey the values and the principles that you are actually setting forth in your business or your cooperative, having those communication skills are a necessary part of it. And again, people who are willing and able to build that trust amongst the stakeholders, advisors, and future members of the proposed enterprise. And you really want to be able to lean in on these because as you get into the work, you'll hear more and more why this is important. Um, and then, of course, having confidence in the ability to instill confidence in each other, in others, rather. Um, Having resilient team members and steering committee members is going to be a critical piece. Um, and of course, respect for confidentiality. And I'm naming all these things because I really, in my own experiences, we want to identify skills and qualities because what ends up happening is sometimes we have people that are willing and able to get on the steering committee, but then sometimes they may not have the time to devote to the project. And so I think naming that is really important that you need to be clear on what it is that you're aiming to do and how much time an individual would have to have in order to actually make this project go forward or the cooperative move forward. And again, it really just depends on your project. Is it a complex business model? Someone who understands the different aspects of your business or has been a part of it or knows a little bit about what it is that you're aiming to do. And some honorable mentions, which I also feel like are very meaningful, is people who can support with understanding financial statements and also understanding challenges of a startup business. And no matter where you are in your phase of work, having some of these attributes are really important, especially having team members. But from a startup standpoint, to get an initiative off the ground and really having people that are committed to the cause and the purpose, these particular qualities and characteristics you'll find become very important. Um, and most co-ops, no matter where you are on the planet, have struggled identifying people that are really high quality steering committee members that can actually do that. And I hate to use high quality because, one of the things we run into is everybody can be trained to do the work. Everyone can learn the skill. The reality of it is that commitment. And if I was to surface one, the commitment is one that's going to be a real game changer for any project that you have on that endeavor that you're working to pursue. And from this, we want to just really lift out being in a cooperative or being in any business, it being in any startup has its set of challenges. And so knowing that the people that you are on, that are on your team are willing and able to go through those challenges with you is also very, very important. And I want to thank y'all for putting this in the chat because it gave me a little bit of a framework of who's in the space and the work you're doing. And I'm curious, and you feel free to come off mute. What are some of the strategies that you have used or you can't think you can use to build you a diverse steering committee? Or if this is your first road with it, please, by all means, you can just name some things that you think could be used to build your steering committee. Like, who do you want on your steering committee, and what are ways that you can actually get people with these skills and characteristics on board? Feel free to use the chat, or if you want to come off mute, would love to hear from you.
Um, Hi everyone, this is Joanna. I would say the first thing would probably possibly be word of mouth. So connecting with people in your network to get recommendations for individuals who might have the set of skills that you mentioned in the last slide that could be good for your steering committee, and then also personal networking. So going to conferences that are in the industry that you are that your cooperative may be a part of, meeting new people, building with them, and then having conversations with those who seem to be on like the same wavelength as you or have the same goals, and finding out if they would be interested in being a part of your steering committee and what you're building.
I love that. Yes. And I'll tell you, the conference setup is definitely always has been a good space where you find people with shared values, because they're there because they have similar or ideas around what it takes to do the work. So I appreciate you lifting that into the space. Any other thoughts, or folks want to provide feedback?
So with the one I'm working on currently, the front porch, the initial kind of idea gatherers just sat down one day and made a list of community leaders that we felt reflected the types of characteristics, or would think that the initial vision made sense. And then we asked those people for reference points throughout the community if they were not, let's say, were at capacity and couldn't participate.
Right. I love that. Uh-oh, we got some scribbling happen here.
Well, right now I'm on about 2 or 3 steering committees. So if you get people who are have a history of working with steering committees and have the experience, or know other people that have have a history of working on steering committees, and connect with those types of people and those types of networks, and get their ideas about who.
Miss Pam, you muted.
Oh yeah, my approach is connecting. Like right now, I'm on about 2 or 3 steering committees of people who have a history of being on steering committees. So you get people who have a history of being on steering committees, and they know other people who have a history of being on steering committees. So I think that's a good approach too.
I love it. Any other offerings before we move on in conversation? Beautiful. So I just want to reflect back what was shared. Personal networking, word of mouth, attending conferences, collecting the initial idea gatherers, and doing brainstorms of those who might be good participants in your steering committee. Those who have shared ideas, and finding out where they are, going to conferences in places where they may be that are industry specific. And then folks who might have a history of being on steering committees. And I just want to lean into that one, Ms. Pam, because people who have been on steering committees before know what it takes to actually like start an entity, and having that experience, whether it's just a person who's consulting with you, or just people that can help give you guidance on organizing your steering committee, is a great resource. So just leaning in on people that that have been in these spaces. And I'll tell you, like, most co-ops, and y'all probably have experience in this, I'm sure you do, when you found the idea, you had a couple of people that felt and connected to the idea. These are the idea gatherers, and y'all really leaned into the work, because this entity was formed because you had a personal need, or though maybe your community had a need, and you had the energy to pursue what it took to actually create a solution for that need. So people who really have the passion, the time commitment, and the energy to pursue meeting a need is would also make good steering committee members. And for some reason, I have someone that has annotation power over my screen, and I got a little scribbling happen here. So I don't know if we could get someone with the annotation off. I don't know who did that.
I thought it was part of the design.
No, I don't know who did that. It kind of works though. We'll keep it there if we can't get it. All right. So here I want to lift out what the steering committee does. And I think you all have some insights on this. But really, the steering committee is going to be the group that is developing the plans, the goals, objectives, policies. Your work is also so to identify and address any potential risk that may be involved with the endeavor that you're working to your cooperative. Also to provide strategic oversight and guidance. And naturally, the steering committee is going to be over making key decisions, decisions on like whether the scope of the cooperative is relevant, or if there's a budget shift, or can we vote on a budget and or timeline, and really to keep track of and assess progress among many things. So as an individual steering committee member, it comes with like being able to hold down a key role. And I just want to name here, some of the elements that we find is that or some of the situations we run into is we often recruit people, and sometimes they aren't able to like hold down the work. And you find that you're either lopsided and the workflow is isolated to a core group of people with certain capacities or competencies, so to say. And y'all can like tell me whether or not this sounds relevant to you, but generally the people with the most administrative capacity are the ones that are holding down most of the work. How about you raise your hand if this sounds resonant to you? Because I certainly know what that feels like. You can virtually raise your hand or put something in the chat like a hello or something if that resonates with you. I saw a thumbs up. Thank you, Pam. Joanna, my apologies. Coretta, thank you for that. I see all kinds of thumbs up. So y'all know that we tend to like get people, and sometimes we just want warm bodies to fill the room. But in reality, we need people with core skills and competencies to really move the work forward, and really being able to have the capacity to hold down a role. And so I have this list of things that I pull and work with Round Sky Solutions on what makes a good collaborative leader. And some of the roles that, some of the work that it requires to hold a role means that you're a person that's willing to bottom line the reason, being able to bottom line the work and the reason for which the role was created, meaning that you are personally invested in the outcomes. Also, really choosing to deliver on the goals, whether it's for the scope and or the team. And, in certain places, if there's something that's challenging or hard to fix, attention, so to say, being able to have that person that's ready to take that thing that needs to be fixed back to the team so that you can collectively find a way to reach that goal. And then being able to reflect on what you might be missing in your role or how you can improve on your delivery. Oftentimes, individuals aren't working for ways or looking for ways that they may be able to get the supports that they're needing. And sometimes we get stuck in a pattern of holding the work by ourselves. And having the group and the collective is really a good piece of the puzzle that helps us understand that we may not have the capacities to do this, or something that I may need to help improve my ability to handle this work. And then also you have to be able to think through your role and related projects sufficiently to make sure you have the tools and the resources. So sort of speaking to the point previously, being able to make sure that you have everything that you need so that the work is able to move forward, and having people on your team that can help you think this way. It also means you're willing and able to track the roles projects and really transparently report back to them on with your team, whether it's operations report or whatever the case may be. People who are willing and able to like have that level of transparency and openness also are some attributes of a steering committee member. Being able to integrate perspectives and feedback from others. As a steering committee member, you're representing the views and the visions of a collective. And oftentimes, and maybe you have a small collective or you have a large collective, but you want to be a forward thinker in your collective and really thinking past just your personal, but being able to take the views of the collective as a part of like how you're holding down your role. And then also being able to deliver on your projects within within the initiatives of the scope. So the scope being, if you have a project there within that scope of work, you're being able to hold that down and stay within the reason why you're there. And delivering projects in a timely manner so you can achieve the larger goal, whether that's renegotiating your commitments if needed with the team, or instead of dropping or missing them. So being able to lean in on the team is going to be critical, because sometimes, we pile on too much. And I heard someone mention like people in community having leadership. Oftentimes we want the innovators on our team, but generally those innovators have their plates full and they gonna drop a few balls. They gonna, I fall victim to this because I do a lot and people really want me to do different things, and I'm learning to say no now. So I think was that Miss Pam say you sit on multiple steering committees. Sometimes being able to hold all those roles get a little cumbersome and we can drop a few balls. So really having the insight within yourself to say, I can't do this. Can I get someone else to handle this? Or I need a different timeline. So really just leaning into that and having people that are willing to make those open admissions around their ability to do that. I say this because often initiatives come to a great halt because certain people in key and critical roles are unable to fulfill their commitments. And I decided to lean in on this piece of the steering committee because we'll recruit, we'll get warm bodies, and then we find that, again, the work is often imbalanced and somebody else is holding out most of the work. And either the team is dependent on someone, or you have people that run into what they call burnout. And then a few other pieces, being able to, and this is honing in on that, closing the loops whenever possible, not starting a project until the last one is done and cleaned up and closed. So sometimes we'll get the great idea to start a new initiative, and being able to have steering committee members that see these patterns in us as a group and say, hey, look, we haven't finished this first thing and now we're moving into another. Can we pause? Can we stop? Can we finish this one thing before we pile on more things? And then again, I want to ascertaining when you need, asserting when you need to ask for help, and then asking for help when it's needed. Again, these are just more qualities but you want to be able to see and experience this with the people that you're recruiting. Because if you don't see these attributes, it begins to go back to that steering committee of one or a few who's holding the work. And then, of course, a couple of things I want to take this piece into a wrap around understanding that you might not get the help that you would like and still deliver that on the project. So that means you're willing to do the work. And, you know, we understand that it's going to be a little lopsided, but we have to recruit more people and then taking reasonable and necessary risks to achieve goals and deliverables. So I want to pause there because I'm sure a lot of this resonated with so many of us here because we all like doing the work. And I just want to ask, what are some of the roles you see necessary for effective steering committee member? I mean, committee, sorry.
I was
Like,
gonna say that, like, the reason why I can do more than one, I think about two, because I'm with organizations that have, they're similar organizations that have similar problems. And, like, so they have similar issues, which makes it easier if you're on more than one. But if it was like a diverse organizations that have different problems, it would be harder. So that's why right now I think I'm on two steering committees.
so you're not doing what I'm doing. I'm on like 2 or 3 and probably need to drop at least 2 of them.
Well, the ones I'm on have similar issues, which makes it easier to follow through.
Got it. Yeah. So
was
go right ahead.
I was gonna say, when I think about like the diverse backgrounds the steering committee should come, like the diverse set of skills. One thing that like comes up for me is probably if you can, I think it would be advantageous to have an attorney on your steering committee. Just someone who could direct because like co-ops and things like that, it comes with its own complexities. So if you have someone who is on the board who's willing to make sure that you're staying within compliance and willing to offer like that input on a pro bono basis as a member of the board, like doing it under their capacity as your steering committee, I think that would probably be one of the first things that I would look for. And probably an accountant too, someone who has that kind of background with finance. Oh, and a grant writer. That's it.
Love it. Got to get the money. You got to
Yes, ma'am.
understand the money. You got to know how to get the money and you got to protect the money.
Exactly. Yep.
I love it. Any other reflections on roles and people that can hold down the work of starting your new organization?
I think that commitment and that passion that you talked about is so important regardless, because people can be very knowledgeable or they could be very, interested, they can see the value, but if they don't have that commitment fueled by some passion to help other people, then you're still trying to acculturate people into that building community model. That's what I have run into. Quite competent in many different ways, can organize their way out of a cornfield, but the passion to help other people. And it's kind of difficult to say that, but you can tell when people prioritize their activities, whether that passion is there. And then when you have conversations, you can hear or not hear that passion in what they choose to talk about.
Ooh, I love that you lifted this out because, one of the things I notice is that people they're gonna, they're gonna invest in the things that they're passionate about, right? We see people invest in so many different things, whether it's a football game or a basketball game or, the latest new shoes. And we see this in our youth, right? But the reality is like you just lifted, if you are passionate about making a difference in your community, you will invest your time, your energy, finances in making a difference. Or if you're invested in this new business, you know, they have skin in the game. And so I think these are all elements that really help make up a really good steering committee. And if you see that people just aren't showing up, or they may have passion for the initiative because right now is not good for them, right now it's just not good for them. And those are things that we have to be real with, is that the timing may be off. And having people that have clarity in their own capacities would help you navigate that real quickly. So I love that you brought that passion back to the forefront, because people do invest in things that they are passionate about. Any additional insights or just thought processes that are surfacing from the group? Okay. Without with that, I want to take us into, oh, I wish I could get rid of this thing, but we're okay. So what does it mean to have a diversity of perspectives? Um, so a good steering committee is going to be able to reflect a variety of opinions, making sure that you have well-rounded decision making. And I really appreciate the previous comment around having an attorney, a grant writer, a finance person, somebody who knows money, an accountant, some grant writer, fundraiser, whatever the development person. But also, it's not just those professional skills. Oftentimes, especially if we're in like a community-based or cooperative that's about meeting the needs, having the diversity of perspective where you're getting representation of voice from people who you're working to support really is a meaningful input. And this is what we see that happens in other communities. They come in, they research our communities, right? We know this, right? They come and research, and then they'll start a nonprofit and bring that nonprofit into our community based off research, right? But they're basing it off the research and their opinions about the research, often creating a nonprofit to collect the funds, but not necessarily meeting the needs of the people that we are, that the research or whatever the nonprofit was set to do. And in our case, when we set an initiative, we're coming in with the perspective of, we are the ones that have the ideas, the opinions, and the information that's going to solve our problems. So we don't want to replicate that in our entities that we are developing. We really do want to be able to make space for those voices, those ideas and thoughts. And so having a steering committee that represents the community or industry that you are working in and a variety of perspectives is really going to be a meaningful piece of the puzzle. And I see Matthew with your hand raised. By all means, definitely offer your contribution here.
No, I just wanted to tie into what you were saying too. Whereas like a lot of other people come into our communities with like research and context, but they don't have the lived experience and they don't have the like being in there and the opinions there. So it's like also increasingly important, just as we have like these like professional roles, but to also have our own research, to have our own data and information, to be able to use that, and not as a stand against what the community's perspective, but a way to like flow with it and say, we have this information, we support it, and this is how we can move on our own. So I wanted to like signal that, because that's a lot of what I do. So I was like, oh yeah, no, this sounds great.
I love it. I love that it raised that for you, and the fact that you named that part of the work of the steering committee really is to collect that valuable insights from the community, and research is the way we do that. but also we are the community. So we're not coming in with that angle that the other side of things are bringing. Ms. Pam, I see your hand raised.
Yes, also, we can even go deeper. Like on one of the organizations that I'm working on, we're actually having the community be the researchers. For example, having a community action plan that's designed by the community for the community about the certain issue that, like, say for instance, if you're going to have a cooperative, whether it's a housing cooperative, food cooperative, whatever, but if the community that that cooperative is going to be in, if the community spearheads the whole research project, and then have a plan that they've developed, then it will be about the community. Because a lot of times people come in our community, they get grants to do things, but it's not really about the community. It's about that organization getting the money and using the community to get that money, right? But this way,
Right.
the community has spearheaded the whole thing, and we're just like facilitators so that the community voice can be first and everything. So this is one thing that we're doing with one of the organizations.
Love that. Valuable insight. And just know that that's the work, and we add that to the stack of work that the steering committee is responsible for, especially, if we're doing community-based cooperative development, being able to have the community itself hold and own that research, as well as the steering committee having the objective insights enough to know that we're not coming in with the same extractive practices we've seen on the other side of things. We're coming to solve the problem and not recreate the problem or even just make it even worse. So I love those insights and reflections. And again, it is not just about those professional backgrounds. It really is about us being able to solve problems together and taking a new approach to leadership and sharing in the work. So we've touched on the role of the steering committee. We'll dive a little bit deeper into that and just have some discussion around like group dynamics, understanding collective decision making, and some of those strategies for that. And the collective decision making, how do we ensure that we're accountable to the decisions we've made as a group? So really, to dive deeper, a steering committee is this group of people who will be setting up, managing in the early stages of a cooperative. It outlines the decisions we made, handles administrative tasks, drives the co-op from an idea to an operational entity. That said, what is the tool that we use in order for us as a cooperative to have our steering committee really do this work? It's cooperative governance. And cooperative governance is really the act of steering cooperatively owned enterprises towards economic, social, and cultural success. It consists of answering key questions, defining roles and responsibilities, establishing the processes for setting expectations, and ensuring that we do have accountability. So really, the steering committee's work is to do all the policy stuff, right? That initial policy brainstorming, that initial, how do we make decisions together? How are we going to hold the work? What will this entity look like? So that's in the governance model that you choose actually helps you navigate to these decisions. And so in the cooperative space, there are a few ways that you can govern, but I really want to lift out and name for the group one of the core elements of cooperative governance is really at the core of it is democratic member control. Democratic member control is one of the 7 cooperative principles, and it's the method by which we are making sure that we're not replicating those harmful practices that we experience in the business as usual model, where people come into your community, they didn't research the mess out of you, right? They didn't came in and now we're going to plop down these things inside your community and tell you this is what you need in your community for your community to be successful. Well, no, our ideas and visions around how we are holding cooperative models really is about us as a people, reflecting our voices in the space. And so at the core of a co-op model is democracy. And cooperatives achieve this through the idea of one member, one vote. But there are a spectrum of ways that you can engage your community from a democratic way. And it could be your traditional Robert's rule where you do votes, but I also want to share with you a couple of different strategies of ways that you can actually do cooperative governance. So governance really is about dealing with the ideas of one member, one vote, and of course, your creating your policies, your bylaws, and your operating agreements is what holds that work. Also, management, democratic management is one of the tools by which your organization culture and practices support member participation. So when you're in your steering committee, part of the work that the steering committee should be thinking about is how is the organization making sure that you're getting your members to participate? What are the mechanisms built into the culture of the cooperative that allows for people to be equipped to participate? And shared management really equates to training and education. And just going back to what I said before, anyone, no matter your background, can learn how to be a steering committee member. But if you're not passionate about it, onboarding and inculcating this training and education, would probably be one of those things that would show up in how they participate. And if they're not willing and able to do that work, that passion, or just don't have the time, then of course it puts a rockiness in democratic governance. So if all your members aren't participating or engaging, it just continues to create that imbalance. So some ways we've done decision making was either we can do majority rule. Most of us are very familiar with this format. This is the process by a vote where if most people vote, it's the most common model. If you get the greater vote, then that's the majority who gets the rule over the vote. Consensus really takes a little bit more time. It's some method that really is quote unquote fair, but it takes a lot of time and energy to get to consensus. Consensus decision making is really a creative and dynamic way of reaching agreement between all members of a group. Instead of simply voting for an idea, having the majority of the group getting their way. Consensus creates space where you iterate and get to a point in the decision that everyone can agree to or at least live with. And there's a model that I've learned to facilitate of consent. And consent is distinctly different from consensus, where consensus is all members are in agreement. Consent basically lifts out, well, there's parts of this that are really difficult, but I don't disagree with the group. I consent to this because it's safe enough to try, right? And so integrative consent is a rapid form of deliberative decision making, which includes the perspectives of those who will enact the decision. This is one that I've actually trained to facilitate, and it basically takes you through a process of hearing from all the members, taking the points of views, and then taking those points of views and integrating this into the decision, hopefully with the purpose of members consenting to what has been collaborated. So I would love to hear, yes, you will have access to this PowerPoint. Definitely, I'll send the updated version back over to Ron and Diane because I did add a few things to it. But yes, I want to hear like, and maybe in the chat or out loud, what method of decision making your cooperatives or your steering committees have been using, and what are some of the, just maybe one or two challenges you've experienced in this decision making method that you have chosen. Any member use majority rule and things felt unfair? And can you name a situation where this has been relevant?
I think within our organization at Black Farmers United, the board, we're part of a larger ecosystem of organizations that support Black farmers across the Northeast and New York State. And within our ecosystem, the decision making has really been for us to all come to a consensus on decisions that are made, no matter how long it takes. Like I know when I first joined the staff at BFU, there was a retreat that the ecosystem did, and we spent a substantial amount of time trying to come to a consensus on what seemed small, but what really in the grand scheme of things was a big issue. But I think the idea behind creating a consensus is so that you don't alienate other organizations or other people who are part of the group, because it can cause a little bit of tension if it's like, all right, we're just going to go with the majority rule. It makes others feel as though their perspective or their opinion doesn't matter. And I think it's important to try to avoid that as much as possible when you're dealing with group dynamics, especially with topics that involve your community, where everyone is passionate and coming from a good space, a good heart, and with good intentions. So for me, I think consensus has been worth the time that it takes to reach consensus in order to create a solution or an answer to a problem or a question. That requires the input of the whole group.
I
And I've
love,
never tried the integrative consent, but I like that one too. Sorry, just wanted to throw that in there.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate like how you brought it to like the type of group that you're working with and the importance of the decision-making method. Because again, if we're doing work inside of community, right, and we have a collective of organizations or we have a collective of people whose voices we have to have as a part of like why we are developing this entity, the way you make decisions can really make or break why you're doing the work. So I just want to really appreciate that you named having consensus was really important because of how the group and who the group represented. You know,
Mhm.
I would love to hear some more feedback from others who have used other like majority rule or other types of decision making that's not listed here. If anyone has any offerings. If not, we can move on. I will reflect personally in my role with Cooperation New Orleans, and I'll just share that Cooperation New Orleans is a local movement for cooperatives. So while we are a loan fund and we provide support to co-ops in our ecosystem, we represent those of us who are on our steering committee represent a number of organizations that that's holding that work. And so for us, we decided to use this method of integrative consent. And I'll just share basically with integrative consent, someone brings a proposal to the table. Um, we get a chance to do a set of rounds to hear feedback on the proposal. The person who is holding the proposal is listening for the feedback and listening for ways that they can integrate the feedback from the group into their proposal or if there's a need for it. from that, after the first round of comments happened, the person who put the proposal on the table is able to either leave the proposal as is or restate the proposal with modifications based off of the feedback of the group. Once that modified or same proposal is presented, the group then determines whether or not this proposal is good enough for us to try, or you need to scrap that and take it to the drawing board. And so I really like this method of decision making because it allows us, even when we can't reach consensus, we can agree to something that's good enough, safe enough to try for now. And with the idea and the knowledge that we might have to come back to this again and name that what the tensions were or what the issues were with the proposal in our note taking and the way we hold space together. So, just wanted to offer that as how we've held this framework. And I actually trained with Round Sky Solutions on integrative consent as a facilitator, and happy to share in another, space of how to navigate through integrative consent. So with that, I love the fact that, this information is meaningful and powerful. And I just want to, name that I'm happy to be offline and in conversation with anyone about any of this. So I'm going to keep going in the presentation, but we'll share my contact information after the fact. So how do we navigate group dynamics in spaces like this? And I know y'all probably have a whole lot of things that you can feed back on, the pros and cons of group dynamics. But just a few bullet points that surfaced for me when I was prepping for this is, what are some things that would help like keep a steering committee going, but also be meaningful to like onboard while you're thinking about curating your steering committee? And the top priority is effective communications. The key to success, communications is the thing, right? So if we don't have a good system for transferring and communicating information back over to our steering committee, people will be left out. Voices will not be heard. Information and tasks won't be carried out. And so if there's not a good system or infrastructure for communications, it can present some challenges, as I'm sure many here who have organized steering committees can testify to. And then, of course, the one bullet point that most of us, we never think about it until it happens, but what is our mechanism for resolving conflict, right? And if we're not talking about that in the early stages of our development, even at the steering level, when y'all first sit at the table, right? How do we know what method, what tool, what process will we take ourselves through when we get to a point where there's something that's not working for us or we hit a block? What are we using within our space to help resolve conflict? So planning for that in the beginning, and there are organizations that do conflict resolution training, community conflict services, having someone that may be a professional conflict resolution specialist give your group some insight, or even on your steering committee would be a meaningful characteristics to have. And then, of course, we spoke to this, we didn't speak it out loud, but that trust piece. This came up for me when we was talking about the research and how people come into our communities and they research, and then we given our information thinking that something's going to come back to us and it doesn't happen, right? So how do we trust the work that's happening? What is the glue that holds us together? And so really building a trust-based steering committee so that we know that, one, the people who are at the table are going to really hold the ship together in the way that we have dreamed of it and envisioned. people who we trust that are going to hold the confidentiality on things that need to be confidential, people that we know that we can trust to really promote and advocate for what it is that we are looking and aiming to do within our cooperatives. But that trust piece plays a critical role. And as we know, in our Black communities, trust is so important. And we often are, people victimized. And I hate to say that so blatantly, but trust is always broken. And so we have to make sure that we're not replicating and repeating those harms that have happened to us in our community. And then the roles. Once you've decided what the roles are, like we've established a facilitator, we've established someone who's going to take notes and be our information manager. We've established someone who's going to be our mission checker, who in our group is going to keep us on mission. Well, that's the whole group, but maybe there's one person that's really has a key for seeing when we're sailing off course. And so we assign that role to someone so that they can actually help us keep the ship balanced. So making sure there's a mechanism in place for us to manage group roles. So those are some of the dynamics, but I'm curious to hear and maybe even just get feedback of things that you've done to like navigate your group dynamics. And I do see a comment in the chat. Oh, it's about research. And Matthew, feel free to come off mute if you want to share this comment. Okay, can't get off mute this second. So I'll just read it out loud for you. So Matthew shared in the chat, when facilitating the design of research data work, I try to use some form of integrated consent. Oh, I'm so glad to hear. I never called it this so amazing. It is a powerful tool to make sure that the community expertise is put in front and center, but definitely needs dedicated, passionate, knowledgeable folks who are willing to contribute. I feel like this framework is the future of development for community-based technology and project. Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. And really just having like these variety of perspectives, I think is also important too, but also people who are willing to like hold the work within the group and be the people that are willing to like keep these elements at the forefront of our mind is really also important. So what are some best practices for steering committee leadership? We talked about some qualities and some traits and attributes. We also mentioned culture and what are some of the things that we want to do in a collaborative environment. But at this point, I want to like have a conversation, which we've already been doing that. In terms of the skills needed for effective committees, I'm curious, what are some barriers that you run into in the skills in the people that you recruited to your steering committee? Or if you haven't already recruited, what are some fears that you have in terms of the people that you might recruit? So this is an open share, and I'm curious to hear from folks of their experiences with recruitment and some of the skills and or barriers that you may have faced with recruiting people on your steering committee.
Well, I'm in the process of trying to create community. And I don't know if it's a fear or if it's what I'm on the lookout for, because I want to stay positive. And that is people who do need a level of leadership education. because so many people in my constituency are really used to top-down work.
Mm.
And um, so, getting them to the point to understand, that there's like I don't know if it's a paradigm shift or just a reality shift, that you can control your own destiny or you can control your own situation, as opposed to constantly, looking for other people's situations to feed into. So that's what I'm that's what I'm on the lookout for, because, that's just, I guess that maybe it's because of that's where I've come from, and I've always been in a leadership position in a top-down organization. So my whole education and learning has to do with building up teams. And I happen to know that a team that's empowered can really get the work done.
I love that insight, because one of the things you raise with that is naming the imbalance of leadership in, like, people who are willing and able to be leaders in community. And most of the time, people don't even realize how they show up as leaders in the community. So being a learning leader is, like how I like to label that. A learning leader is one of the things that I think shifts the balance of power in community and actually helps us navigate to a shared space. So I love the framework of someone who's a learning leader. Thank you for that. Miss Pam, I see you with your hand
Be
raised.
out for a minute, but I was going to say an issue that we've had with some of our steering committees is, as you mentioned before, sometimes you get one person that does all the work, and the issue, that's a barrier, because now last week and a couple of months ago, we had people on our steering committee suddenly pass away. you know so when people suddenly pass away and they've been doing all the work, the issue is that have they passed down the information to other people? There are other people on the steering committee, but a lot of times there are not other active people on the steering committee that have the information that they had. So what I would think, what I try to do is look for, like, a lot of times these are sometimes older people who, well, the person who passed, this other person who passed, but she was a younger person, but she was very dynamic. She suddenly passed away. And there was an older person that suddenly passed away. And the issue is because in Black communities, sometimes people are afraid to let their power go. They've had power for so long, until in certain areas they've been working so long, so they don't want to pass it down to younger people, but to identify some of the youth who can be trained in some of these areas, so that if, like, some of the people are not there or retire or pass away, they could step into that role. So I think that's one of the barriers that I see in the Black community.
Yes, aging leaders, and needing to have more youth leadership. And I just, that's such, I think, a dynamic that most of our communities are facing. Like, I personally am navigating that challenge with the work that I do with my nonprofit. I recently had an event here in New Orleans, and one of the leaders here had a stroke. And so just knowing that, these are the people who are willing to hold down the work of being leaders, and, like, creating space for youth leaders, I think is a really important element. And so, if I was to add a bullet point to this slideshow, I'd say creating space to train the next generation of leaders, and supporting that work. And so if we were to add a characteristic to our steering committee, I would say let's add some young people to our steering committees, and be willing and able to train them to be those leaders, and teaching them how to take on the next generation. So love that insight. Thank you for that. And just a few things that I'll name here, like in terms of leadership skills, you really want people that are, again, we keep saying that commitment, but commitment is just like core, right? Even if they just show up for the meeting and when they get to the meeting, everything that they say is on point. Like I've had steering committee members that they don't lift a finger to do anything, but because when they get in the space, what they have to say is so powerful, we were able to capture that energy and really use that to activate it. Sometimes that's meaningful. Sometimes I'm not saying don't have imbalance of people not willing to do the work, but sometimes that insight of people with the experience, the knowledge, one who's been in business for over 30 years may have some valuable insights. They may not be able to commit the time, but maybe they're a good advisory committee member and not a full-on active steering committee member. So knowing how to like delegate those roles when the commitment is not there. Having people that are good communicators and active listeners and skilled at managing group dynamics, already with those skills. And really I want to stress the importance of emotional intelligence, which we didn't talk about here in this space. But emotional intelligence is one of those skills that you can see in your team and know in your team when there's a need for a shift, supports, and providing them with the support they need to be a better leader. And so having people in space with the level of emotional intelligence is also very important and critical.
Something that's coming up for me is also just because I see you're speaking to fostering collaborative culture. I'm like wondering, I've never put together a steering committee, but I'm just like wondering about belonging and trying to cultivate belonging on the steering committee so everyone feels seen and understood, because we all communicate in different ways, and have different gifts and express ourselves in different ways, and how to like ensure that everyone is on the same page and can like work together. I think really trying to cultivate a culture. And I don't know how exactly you do that, but just really making sure everyone knows that they belong there and we want to hear them, I think is also really key.
I really appreciate that because like your meeting space can be a space that collaborative culture is initially integrated. I would say from how you build your agenda, if one person is building and setting the agenda, then that's not a real big space for collaborative culture. But if there's a space, and I'll just name with Cooperation New Orleans, we running in a living agenda. So our notes are, we have one document, our agenda with our minutes are all in that one document. And team members can go back to that one document and see what happened before. But also what we do in that space is sometimes at the end of our meetings, we set the agenda for the next meeting. But if we haven't had time to do that, we'll make space in this meeting to build the agenda together. So agenda building is one of the ways that you foster that collaborative culture. The integrative consent process is a decision-making tool that actually helps to get the voices of everyone heard. Have you ever been in a meeting where a vote was posed and everybody, you were given, well, a proposal was put on the floor and two or three, when it's multiple members, one or two people are having cross communications, but other people are sitting there, they have thoughts and they're ruminating in their thoughts, but the one or two people are taking up the floor. So integrative consent takes it where those one or two people don't get to hold the floor hostage. You ask for the views for those who have a view to offer that view. So everyone gets to say something about the proposal. So little meeting techniques and strategies inside of the meeting space helps to create that collaboration. And again, you don't want to create a space where people are just waiting on you to show up with all the answers. You really want to have a space where you are pulling those answers from the group, right? And you're pulling that, you know, and a good facilitator helps to bring that out. So being able to have your team with roles and responsibilities and knowing if who on your team is a good facilitator, or you get the training so that you can be a good facilitator. So just a couple of little things, right? But information sharing, right, is like the deal breaker. If the information is not widely shared, there's no space for collaboration there, right? So I appreciate you bringing that insight into the space and just, you know, I want to name there are ways that that can happen through the meeting, through how you make decisions, through how you're forming your proposals, and it really creates for inclusivity. And it also helps to balance those interests and align goals. I see Naima. Welcome to the floor, Naima.
Thank you. This was just making me think about my I always talk about my community foundation when we were I think yeah, it's important to do like not team building, but like we had like consultants come on talk about anti-racist, you know, history. We also did like a what is it called? Like a Black history, African American history tour, and just, you know, and then from those experiences we had we talked about, you know, those experiences as well, not just, you know, not just doing it, but also like how does this affect our work. So that, I mean, it's not really the same thing, but to kind of be on the same page and have those kind of education experiences so that everyone understands, you know, the more of the context of, and there were a lot of people on the board who, you know, maybe they're an African immigrant and they didn't understand, you know, some of the in American racism issues, that, you know, that it was very clear that it was needed, and that, you know, it helped us, you know, be able to move forward, kind of like we're all understanding, we're all coming from a shared understanding.
Oh, it's very much in alignment. I just want to name that, you know, shared education is one of the critical elements for, you know, creating that collaborative culture. Because if we learn together, right, we're on the same trajectory. And that's the one thing I love about developing cooperatives. As a co-op developer, one of the things I do with working with groups is the steering committee goes on a learning journey together, right? Because sometimes we don't know what we don't know when we're going into a venture, and having us do the assessing and learning from professionals that may be on the steering committee or people we may call. Having the TA, technical assistance providers, give us whatever education we need so that we can make the best decision on the entity type that we're choosing. Those are all those learning experiences that helps people be on the same page and also has vested interest in the direction of the organization. And I love that you mentioned team building exercises, because that is one of the things that helps us ensure that we trust each other. I know many of us have seen like the Office and those some of us may have seen The Office, where they've had these comical team building exercises, but the comedy in that and the reality of that is people that find ways to have joy together actually find ways to bring great entities into fruition and build a lot of trust with each other. So I just want to name, like, I'm putting all these technical things on the floor, but trust really comes from us like creating that space so that we can learn about who we are, what our interests are. Do we have shared and aligned goals, right? Do we have similar interests? And having joyful events can actually be a part of that trust building. Like we in Cooperation New Orleans, we'll sometimes do a co-op night out, and where we go meet up and have drinks, and that really helps us to foster like that shared environment. Or like when we start our meetings, we'll have a check-in question that's more personal and not so much about the business. So there are things that you can do inside of the meeting space, but there also, I encourage groups to do stuff outside of the meeting space to help you really build that relationship. Because sometimes if you just in the meeting by itself, you know, we have, cooperatives have a different set of values, a different set of principles, and being able to invest in each other on a deeper level helps to foster that culture of collaboration with each other. So thank you for that. And I think I'm getting close to my time. Is that correct, Ron?
Um, you have about a half an hour, to
Oh,
go.
I got a half hour. Okay.
Yeah. Well, Lisa Roof, well, you're doing Q&A as you go along.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I would
So, yeah.
love to make it more of us talking about our woes now. We've talked about some best practices. We've talked about some, what are some things that we need to incorporate. I'm wanting to dig in on the challenges a little more, and I'll stop the presentation because I did actually have some group exercises, but when I saw the size of the group, I pulled back on the group exercises. So I want to invite us into more of a conversation setting around like what where are you facing the hardest challenges with your work with your steering committee? And are there some sharing with this group that we can actually help solve some of some of those challenges? Or even just group discuss some of the challenges.
So I think the biggest challenge would be, and I'm thinking about the cooperative that I want to start. Um, we have a family-owned grocery store, but at the moment we're only doing non-perishable items because we haven't built up partnerships with local Black farmers just yet, who have the capacity to fill a grocery store on a consistent basis. So that's one of the things that we're looking for. But in terms of our leadership, because it is family owned, we and this business would be in Philadelphia. The board of directors or steering committee are not allowed to be family. So that entails recruitment in the community from individuals who are not a part of the family. So I think one of the biggest things within the Black community, just in general, is the trust that we have for each other and really understanding the dynamics of what it means to, put our time and effort into something and money into something to build something that's lasting that can be handed off to the next generation. So I think to answer your question, the biggest challenges is identifying individuals who are trustworthy, who can have the time commitment to build something from the ground up, and then understanding how to work together as a group. When you have so many personalities together, this is why I think the conflict resolution piece, having processes in place for that type of thing is super important. Understanding how to navigate conflicts that may arise between individuals without individuals becoming a little bit too emotional or not using emotional intelligence and things like that. So to answer your question, I think it's trust and being able to find the right individuals without fear of damaging the dynamics of the group as you bring in and recruit more individuals to be a part of the committee.
Thank you for that. And Oftentimes we may have to train up the right leaders in the group. So I'm appreciating the comment that we had before around what does it mean to be a learning leader?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe the people may not have all the skills or the attributes, but do we have time and space in the development of the work to curate a learning journey so that the leaders are getting the education on how to hold that work, and really build up the mechanisms so that we are in a trusting space.
Yeah.
I
And the
love
other
that.
thing I wanted to uplift without taking up too much time is the idea that was mentioned earlier about um, not letting go of power. I think the sword cuts both ways because dealing with individuals who are like that cross generational thing can be challenging at times because even myself, I'm a millennial, but I do find myself very disconnected from Gen Zs and the way that they operate a lot of the time. So I can just imagine what that gap may be for the generation before mine, trying to operate within the same space and train a Gen Z who is so used to instant gratification or who think that they know everything. No offense to any Gen Zs on here, sorry. Um, but it is a very different dynamic when it comes to even work ethic. And that's not to say that Gen Zs don't understand the importance of working hard. I don't mean to say that by any means, but I think we all can agree just the way that technology and just things have made it a lot easier for this younger generation. The work that you are used to putting in or seeing done by millennials and the generation before, it's a big dynamic. So I think when you think of the idea of letting go of power, I think it's that fear there that the work isn't going to be done efficiently or that corners are going to be cut. So I think that training Gen Zs or just conversations, more group conversations around what it means to honor your elders and have respect for those who are older than you and who have more experience within this space, like really creating that deference for these individuals who are going to teach you would really help making that transition of power a lot easier.
Mm.
And the thing that I love about like cooperatives in this particular scenario is that we get to co-create how the work is done. And, just like you named that, older generations may have a way that they see that the work is held and it has to look this way. And a younger, the Gen Zs and your generations after that will probably want to use a
Alpha.
technology to say that again.
Those darn alphas. That's after
I
Gen Z.
know.
Alpha
The
generation.
alphas. I was like
It's
looking
about
for
to
the
be even
word.
worse.
Those alphas, they have a different way of like they'll pop an app out and we're done, we did it, and that's all the talk we're gonna talk because the app did it for us. And for me, I'm a Gen Xer or the boomers before me, we have a different set of values. So democratic management in a cooperative model gives us the room to use a framework for us to come into a space for us to share the work, and really hone in on how it's held. So that's why a learning portion of the steering committee, like putting the steering committee in a learning mode, helps us co-create and curate how we hold down the work, what scopes, what roles are necessary to move the work forward, and what are the processes and the procedures that we want to use, whether it's a cultural practice or whether it's some kind of technology tool that we want to use to make it be a reality. I think democratic management gives us and affords us space to co-create and build something that we haven't built before. And so I just want to name that. It does take a willingness for each generation, because this is, and I say this because I'm curating a co-op with my children right now. And it's challenging. It's definitely challenging intergenerationally because they always think that as a parent, I'm trying to tell them what to do. And that's not always the case. So giving them the tools of we're learning together so that we can create what works for us together has been really the game changer for me. And I would love to share more about democratic management and just a few more ways that we can do democratic management. But definitely want to, keep the space for that feedback too. Are there additional challenges that people have been dealing with in getting their team or building their steering committee? And if not, I'll say more about democratic management.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can go right ahead.
Good evening. My name is Josh. I'm a part of the team representing the Boston Udema project. I came in a little bit late, but I heard most of it, most of what was shared. I did have one question. I guess it also kind of comes off the heels of what Ms. Pam was saying earlier, and then kind of what you were just talking about. One question I had to you based on your experience is like, how do you curate like a balanced steering team or steering committee, and how do you leverage the background experience of those that are in this balanced team? And then going back to the conversation earlier with Ms. Pam, like how do you bring people to the table that might not necessarily naturally gravitate towards like a leadership or steering committee position? Because I've noticed like in the past, not just with like A's, but just like there's certain people that always find themselves in these roles of like leadership. And some of it's A specific, some of it's just role specific. It really depends. But like how do you bring people in that are just kind of newer, might have an interest, but for whatever reason, maybe it's history, trauma, have kind of felt like uncomfortable necessarily being in a steering committee role or leadership role?
I love this question. And I'm going to answer based off one of my experiences. Um, in one of the groups that I became a member of, in my onboarding process, a couple of things happened. Is I had a buddy who was like there with me to make sure that I was able to like grasp what was being presented. So like being able to like feel comfortable into the space of being on the committee. That person was like my go-to person if I had questions. So curating space where information can be like disseminated, but in a way that's meaningful to the recipient. And I think that also speaks to like the generational barriers and how information is communicated. The other thing that they did before I even came on board is um, they did a little bit of a assessment, and they had me do a self-assessment of my skills and what I was able to contribute. And also they had like a curated list of questions that I was able to look at in those questions to determine whether or not like doing this work on this steering committee was for me. And instead of me like having to go like type up and fill out an essay, they gave me the questions ahead of time and asked me what was my preferred method of responding to these questions: survey, one-on-one interview, or personal write-up. And they gave me three options. And so I chose the personal interview because I like to talk. So it was easy for me. They created this space based off of my learning style, right? They knew that people come in with a variety of ways of like receiving and disseminating information. So recruiting, it made it feel really comfortable that I could fit in, and it boosted my confidence that I had someone that was able to support me. Because oftentimes you're asked to sit on a board or a steering committee, and maybe if you've never done it before, one of the biggest challenges you face is fear that you're not skilled enough, or fear that you don't have the right experiences. But the biggest challenge is fear. So, how do you overcome those fears? And that's really giving people the supports that they need so that they feel more comfortable. Recruiting, I will say a thing that I've done when it came to recruiting steering committee meetings, steering committee members um, with some of the groups that I work with is we've hosted info sessions, right? And I'm sure y'all all may have done these things. Info sessions can look like having coffee conversations with people, or doing a general call to a certain sector of people and letting them know that we have doing an open call, but also getting that one-on-one personal with them. But I'm curious to hear if anyone else has some insights that they like to offer to the question, or just some ideas that surfaced in during my share back. And Josh, if that was helpful or not helpful, I would love to feedback, thumbs up, thumbs down would be
Yeah,
meaningful.
I was gonna say before people jumped in, like that was really helpful and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that.
I just had an experience that might be helpful. I just a couple of weeks ago, I attended the League of Women's Voter Youth Summit. And at the youth summit, the youth were from various sectors in the community. And based on what the youth were saying about older people is that our main, like anything that we've ever said about them, they could regurgitate everything that we've ever said about them. And they were talking about the fact that older people, let me see, can I put it the way they said it, are afraid to step out of their comfort zone with them, right? They won't step out of their comfort zone. And also, the youth were saying that their listening skills is different from our listening skills. So we think that they're not listening, but because they can regurgitate everything that was ever said, we know that they are listening. So from that, I gleaned like a series of like one of the meetings that I myself had with some of the youth when I was the director of AmeriCorps, I used to have roundtable discussions with the youth, right? And ask them various questions and have community conversations and what you can get out of that. There are youth that are interested in various subjects, right? So then whatever your steering committee is about, if you ask some of the youth some of those questions, you're able to glean and pull from those particular youth, their interests, are able to organize the information so that they will chime in and so that they will be interested. And you'll see that if the older people step out of their comfort zone, right, and are willing to listen to them, some of their language, some of their behaviors, as far as Gen Zs and millennials, they're saying that you'll have to adopt some of those things into your realm because this is what they know. This is their generation, right? So I feel like having a series of round table discussions and how do you get those youth going to the schools, going to the community centers, you know, dealing with where are youth at? The older people have to be able to reach the youth, touch the youth, right? Get among the youth, right? And you'll see that they will gravitate to you. It's not really that hard, but we treat it as it's hard because we're a different generation, and it's, you know, for us it's hard, right? But this is what I found, and you'll see that there are youth that will gravitate toward. There's certain youth that will gravitate toward your topics, and then you can pull those youth in and have various meetings and keep weeding those various youth out. And before you know it, you can add those people to your steering committee. This is what I find.
I so appreciate this. And what I'm hearing you say really leans into a method of like education that I really am a huge fan of, which is popular education, right? Oftentimes we bring a lot of wisdom into spaces, and like me as a presenter, I could have come to this space with the approach of I'm giving this group all the info, I have the insights, but I'm of the opinion that we as a people collectively have the shared values and insights and the perspectives. And oftentimes, if you facilitate the space in a way that you can get buy-in, you can get people, you can get feedback, you can build your steering committee by giving people the space to be heard, and they feel connected to what you're sharing because you've listened to them. So listening sessions and curating space where you're getting feedback from the community that you're a part of really helps to encourage people to buy into any initiative. And I'm lifting that out because it's also a tool to help those intergenerational members be more active. And so I tend to always come into a presentation with the approach that there's a lot of wisdom already in the space, and how do we pull that wisdom into the body of the collective? So with that said, I know I'm now approaching that few minutes left remaining in the session, and want to appreciate all those who are adding to the space. And I want to encourage you to really use the tools that we discussed today. And if there's an additional insight, I think we have room for one or two more comments, and I'll go into my close. All
Just
right.
real quick, real quick, I want to say, when you listen to those young people, you'll see that you have some Kamala Harris's and some of Barack Obama. When you listen to them, you'll see that some of those youth they were just they were par excellent just to listen to them, you know. So I'm just going to say that if we listen, we'll see that there's some real talent.
I love that. I love it. And active listening is one of the key components that we lifted out as a necessity for having a good steering committee members. So I just want to just circle back to some points that we lifted out in this session. I'm grateful for all who shared space today and offered their points of views and their insights. And I just want to name that we shared about what are some characteristics of a good steering committee member. We heard that commitment was really important for this space. We heard that people with a variety of perspectives was also a meaningful aspect to have in this space. Some additional things that I think that we named were important was really having those folks who were willing to like be collaborative with each other and really be a learning leader makes a good steering committee member. Some additional things that we heard was about, ways you can recruit our personal networking, word of mouth, getting with the people who are those initial idea gatherers, and having those folks give you feedback on who might be a good steering committee member. The other things we lifted out were the importance of having some of the things in the front of this steering committee, like having conflict resolution skills and other resources to help you really make those decisions. So I'm gonna bring this to a close and offer appreciations to the Black Coopnomics Academy for having me here. And I'm going to pull this slide as a full slide so you can see that. Give me 1 second. And you are welcome and able to reach out to me if you have comments, questions. And really, I want to be a good facilitator, listener, and learning leader with you all. Thank you for having me, y'all.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Ma.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your wisdom and
Appreciate it.
your openness to share your perspective and guide us to understanding our perspective about leadership and what we need to do to cultivate meaningful leadership in our organizations. We're as I said earlier, we're at the halfway point, and we have 6 more sessions to go, and this has certainly been a great session led by Tamar. And again, I appreciate you for who you are and how you show up. Yes. So with that said, folks, you have her contact information. Feel free to reach out to her, and I think you do have it in the spreadsheet as well, but if not, I'll make sure that you get it again. And have a great evening. And I look forward to seeing you all again next Thursday at 6 o'clock. Be blessed.
Peace, everyone.
Bye. Take care, everybody.
Good night. Bye, Joanne. Bye, Matthew. Bye, everyone. And Tanisha, bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night.